Hey guys, this is Clinton Jeff and this is my Vivo U20 review. In September this year, Vivo announced a new budget smartphone called the Vivo U10, which was powered by a Qualcomm Snapdragon 665 that also powered the two most popular budget phones at the time, the Redmi Note 8 and the Realme 5. As you can guess, Vivo's entry into that very competitive price segment was a pretty good success. But their competition came out with newer models at a slightly higher price segment, and well, so did Vivo with the slightly more premium Vivo U20 that was announced last week. The Vivo U20 is powered by a Snapdragon 675 that gives it a pretty substantial edge over its competition. But is there more to this phone? Let's find out. As usual, let's start with design. The Vivo U20 measures 162 by 76 by 8.9 millimeters and weighs in at about 193 grams. That's not too large or bulky at all, even though it is a large phone to use. Much of that size is due to the large 6.53-inch IPS LCD display. Thankfully, Vivo went with a full HD Plus screen on the Vivo U20. This is definitely appreciated because the U10 had a 720p HD Plus display instead. As you probably noticed, there's also a water drop notch up top, which is a little large but not too bad. The display also has quite wide viewing angles, though there is some color distortion depending on the angle. It's definitely bright enough so that it's comfortable to use even outdoors on sunny days. Color reproduction isn't as great as an AMOLED screen, but it's not too bad at all. The bezels on the side are pretty slim, and Vivo claims that the U20 has a screen-to-body ratio of 90.3%, which is pretty decent for a phone in this price range. There's also a pre-applied screen guard, which is appreciated, especially with the included case, so that your phone is protected right from day one. The case itself is actually really well done with raised edges so that it'll protect the screen. That being said, without a case, the front of the phone has a very odd ridge against the curved frame, which does feel a little uncomfortable when you're holding it. But if you're going to put this phone in a case, that's not going to be an issue. Coming to the back of the phone, there's a glossy back panel that does catch fingerprints quite easily, so you'll have to keep wiping it clean. Really, seriously, this phone attracts fingerprints like crazy. I spent a really awful lot of time trying to keep it clean for all the photos and videos I took. Again, not a problem if you're going to put a case on it. You'll find the Vivo branding in landscape orientation here, along with the triple camera module and a single LED flash. The camera module is slightly raised at the edges to protect the camera lenses from scratches, but it's still definitely going to get scratched, again, unless you use a case. So yeah, a whole bunch of reasons for you to use the case that comes in the box. There's also the rear-mounted fingerprint scanner, which is smaller than I'd like and placed a little bit too high to be comfortable. That being said, the fingerprint sensor does work quite well and the phone is quick to unlock. Coming to the sides, on the right side of the phone, you'll find the power and volume buttons, which are placed in an okay position and are comfortable enough to use. Personally, I feel like they're placed a little higher than I'd like, but it's not too bad. The left side of the phone lacks any buttons, only having the dual SIM card tray, which also has space for a micro SD card. At the top of the U20, you'll find no ports or buttons here either, while at the bottom of the U20, you'll find the 3.5mm headphone jack, the loudspeaker grill, a pinhole for the primary microphone, and shockingly enough, you'll also find a micro USB port here. The micro USB port is admittedly a bit disappointing since most of the competition have already moved on to USB Type-C, but oh well. Apart from that, the loudspeaker isn't the loudest, so that's another minor flaw so far. There's two colors of the Vivo U20. There's the Racing Black, which is the unit I got, which is kind of a little boring. But there's also a Blaze Blue, which is more flashy with reflecting gradients in the back panel. All in all, in terms of design, the Vivo U20 is a little bit generic. Not really much of a wow factor here, but it's not too bad. Let's move on to hardware. As unimpressive as the design might be, the Vivo U20's hardware is actually really impressive. There's a Qualcomm Snapdragon 675 processor, which also powers the Redmi Note 7 Pro, which is way more expensive than this phone when it launched earlier this year. The Snapdragon 675 is a pretty powerful processor, especially at this price point, which is able to handle multitasking and gaming with no lag or issues at all. It's really interesting to see Vivo come out with such a powerful processor on a phone at this price point because the competition that's known for cheap and powerful phones, Xiaomi and Realme, only have the Redmi Note 8 and the Realme 5 at this price, which is powered by the much less capable Snapdragon 665 instead. And as if that powerful processor wasn't enough, the U20 also has 4GB or 6GB of RAM. There's also 64GB of onboard UFS 2.1 storage and a microSD card slot as well. As you guys probably already know, UFS 2.1 really does help with faster data transfers and definitely contributes to the speed of this phone in some small but significant way. In terms of benchmarks, you guys know I'm not a big fan of benchmarks, but the Vivo U20 does score pretty impressively in AnTuTu and Geekbench and much higher than its closest rivals, the Redmi Note 8 and the Realme 5S. As a result, gaming on the Vivo U20 is actually a really good experience. I played PUBG Mobile on the high preset with graphics set to HD and frame rate set to high. And hey, not a big surprise, but I had no issues at all. There was no lag and barely any stutters or frame drops, and it all played surprisingly well. That being said, like other phones with a Snapdragon 675 processor, the phone does get a little bit warm after about 20 or so minutes of gaming. But like I said, it's just warm, it's not too bad. In terms of connectivity, the Vivo U20 has Bluetooth 5.0, dual band Wi-Fi, and FM radio, and pretty much everything else that you'd expect out of a phone in this price range. Alright, that's hardware, let's move on to software. The Vivo U20 runs FunTouch OS 9.2 on top of Android 9 Pie, which is pretty much your usual Vivo phone in terms of software. FunTouch OS is something you'd either love or hate, and there's a tiny bit of bloatware installed as well. There's pre-installed apps like Gaana, Amazon, Opera, and a couple more, but it depends on the market that you're buying this phone in. And thankfully, you actually can uninstall most of them. In terms of usability, if you've used FunTouch OS before, you'll be used to the slight oddities here and there. There's a few non-traditional things on FunTouch OS that you'll have to get used to versus any other Android phone. Like for example, you'll have to swipe up from the bottom of the screen to access the quick toggles, which is the exact opposite of the action for every other Android smartphone. But it's just like the old version of iOS, which is just a coincidence. Now admittedly, this is a little annoying and a little confusing at the start, but eventually you do get used to it. And Vivo also allows you to change it to a swipe down from the upper right side. Again, just like the iPhone, which is another coincidence. There's also a couple other customization options as well, and you can also change the animations and themes. There's also Vivo's smart assistant called Jovi, which can recognize products that you point the camera at. It can also remind you to drink water several times throughout the day, which is very important. But apart from that, it's not really much more useful than Google Assistant. There's a few smart features like Raise to Wake and the ability to launch apps by just drawing alphabets on the lock screen. There's also a motorbike mode as well. And as expected, there's also dark mode and gesture navigation too. Apart from that, there's also an ultra game mode, which lets you block incoming notifications and automatically answer phone calls in hands-free mode when you're playing games so that you don't have any distractions when you're gaming. In addition, there's also an off-screen autoplay feature which lets you run a game even with the display switched off. Not entirely sure how useful that will be, but hey, it's in there. Apart from that, it's your usual Chinese manufacturer Android UI. Pretty much exactly what you'd expect nowadays. Let's move on to the camera. The Vivo U20 has a triple camera setup. This includes a 16 megapixel primary camera with a Sony IMX499 sensor, an 8 megapixel ultra wide angle camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. For selfies, there's a 16 megapixel front facing camera. Vivo's camera app hasn't really changed much and has a variety of modes including a night mode, portrait mode, live photo mode. There's AR stickers along with the usual time lapse and panorama modes, and even a pro manual mode as well. There's shortcuts on screen for HDR and a bunch of filters built in. There's also toggles to switch between the wide angle and super macro cameras. There's also an on-screen toggle for 2x zoom, but that's a digital zoom, not telephoto, so don't count on that for quality too much. In terms of camera quality, the Vivo U20 is quick to focus and handles exposure pretty well. Daytime images look pretty good in the gallery app, but do suffer in terms of details, which is especially noticeable when you zoom into a picture that you've taken. There's also a tiny bit of grain that sweeps into each photo as well. The wide-angle camera suffers from the same distortion at the edges and lack of details that we see with other wide-angle cameras in this price range. But that being said, moving on to portrait photos, they have pretty good edge detection with a good amount of detail and a very natural level of bokeh. But that being said, there's actually a separate bokeh mode where you can adjust the level of bokeh, and the results are again pretty good. There's also a macro mode that is pretty decent, but the images are just 2 megapixels large, which isn't much resolution to work with, but I guess they're good enough to Instagram if you want to. Coming to low light image quality, photos aren't too great unfortunately. There's a real lack of details and a lot of grain. The dedicated night mode does help get brighter images, but they aren't really that much better. There's also no image stabilization, so you'll want to stay really still if you use the night mode to take photos. Coming to the selfie camera, once again, the results are kind of a little average. There's a bit of grain that swoops into each picture once again, but in case you're interested in selfie videos, the camera can record up to 1080p resolution video, which is pretty decent. Ultimately, taking everything else into consideration, the camera quality on the U20 just isn't the best in this price range. Coming to video quality, the Vivo U20 can surprisingly record up to 4K resolution video with the primary rear camera. There's also a bit of video stabilization that helps get decent enough results. Again, this is only in bright daytime lighting though, because low light video quality again wasn't too great as expected. But yeah, that's pretty much the camera quality on the U20. It's a little bit disappointing considering that Vivo is usually known for great cameras. So while it's not really that bad, it's not too great either. Alright, let's move on to battery life. The Vivo U20 is powered by a massive 5000 mAh battery, which as you can guess is really freaking great. Battery life on the Vivo U20 is actually really good. You can very easily use this phone for a day and a half on a single charge before you'll even need to reach for a charger. On a day of heavy usage with a bit of PUBG, gaming, and a couple shots on the camera with the usual bits of social media and WhatsApp, I still had plenty of battery life percentage left when I got home at the end of the day. With the Vivo U20, you have this reassurance that you don't have to worry about battery life while you use this phone, which is really just an awesome feeling. Even charging up the U20 doesn't take too long considering it's a giant 5000 mAh battery. The supplied 18-watt dual-engine fast charger gets the phone from 0 to over 30% in just half an hour, reaching about 60 to 70% in 1 hour. A charge to 100% takes about an hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours, which again isn't too bad, all things considering. Alright guys, so with all of that out of the way, it's time for the CJ verdict, and here we go. Honestly, no one expected Vivo of all companies to come out of nowhere and suddenly be this really strong contender in this very aggressive entry-level price segment. I mean, this is a company that usually pumps out very premium smartphones. And then here we are with an entry-level smartphone that is weirdly premium for the price range. There's a powerful processor, a large battery, great pricing, and the only minor flaws is that the camera quality isn't that great and that there's a micro USB port, but it's still pretty good enough. I mean, I still think micro USB ports should be illegal at this day and age, but oh well. The only real competition is the Realme 5S, which is similarly priced with a 48 megapixel quad camera module along with the 5000 mAh battery. And then there's the Redmi Note 8, which has a slower processor and smaller battery, but MIUI can be nicer to use even if it is filled with ads. At the end of the day, if you're on a budget and looking for the most powerful phone you can buy in this price range, especially in regard to gaming, well then the Vivo U20 is pretty much your best bet right now. It's just really the most powerful option. Alright guys, so that's what I think about the Vivo U20. As always, if you have any questions about this phone, you can let me know right in the comment section below. Or you can ask me right over on Instagram or Twitter at ClintonJeff. And hey, if this video was helpful to you, don't forget to hit the like button right below or maybe subscribe because that would be appreciated. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.